Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk, the one and only podcast made to bring the tech to the streets to shed light on how the new era of automation is changing the roles of drivers and passengers today. Lisa Bailey, the founder of FeaturesFirst Auto and co-host product specialist Luke Verseput, will discuss how today is no longer just about the art of keeping up with the trends. Safety is a priority. While one can appreciate the luxurious experience cars can provide, when it comes to interacting, connecting, and co-piloting with automated technology, full understanding is needed. Whether you are an early adopter, car enthusiast, parent, or concerned citizen, this is the podcast for you. You will gain deeper knowledge on the technology at work in your car that provides you a safer driving experience, gain insights on your role as a driver or passenger in the new era of automation, and hear actionable advice and solutions when you listen to Features Talk. Here's your host, Lisa Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of FeaturesTalk Podcast. I am so excited to be here for another episode with Luke, my co-host, product specialist. We are so grateful to have Luke join us for another episode where he is going to be providing his expertise as a guru car specialist, someone who right now whose primary role is to connect drivers to the technology in their car. And so the topic today of being able to talk about safe driving and what is the strongest safety feature. If you can consider all the safety features that we have, what would be the strongest safety feature? So we're going to be talking about best practices for drivers in this episode. So I'm so excited to be able to get started with Luke. Luke, tell everybody hello and introduce yourself.
Hey, so yeah, my name's Luke. I'm one of the product specialists with Kia, and yeah, my whole job is actually just focused on the features of the car. My whole thing is just know everything about the car. So yeah, this has been kind of a cool thing of essentially kind of doing what I do at work, but hopefully getting it out to more people and not having to wear a collared shirt and dress pants.
Exactly. And you know what? I love what you said. Get it out to more people. And that's exactly what Features First is all about. We are bringing the tech to the streets. Yeah, we got our shirts on today. We are bringing the tech to the streets to simplify the information for our community. So let's get started talking about safety features and safe driving and what that means for drivers in 2021 and beyond, not just 2021, but and beyond. And really thinking about that from an automation standpoint. If you think about the evolution of car safety and where cars have enhanced with the technology that has been implemented in it, how has car safety evolved in the new era of automation, and how has our roles as we integrate and interact with the car now change perspectives, I would say. And so I know my role as a driver, it definitely is a whole lot different going from even the human behavior of sticking a key into a car and turning it to turn the ignition on versus having a press start. When I think about the human behavior change, and maybe the pros and cons that comes with that change. And so when we think about evolution, Luke, of car safety, what would you say, thinking about some things that are in vehicles now, how the evolution of car safety has changed?
It's interesting. So when it comes to the evolution of car safety, I'm just to kind of put it in perspective, I'm 29 while I'm
in a few more days.
At the time of this shooting, I will be 29 in 3 days.
Yay!
And so suffice to say, I'm 29. So I was born in 1992. So there's obviously been a lot of car safety development that happened before I was born. To just only very lightly touch on that, obviously in the past, seatbelts weren't even required. There were no airbags, none of those kind of systems. I mean, cars were just pieces of metal with engines that you were entirely in control of, and that was that.
Which is a scary thought.
It's a scary thought. But now more to the point of car evolution now, when it comes to that in general, that one saying or one kind of one-liner always comes to mind. It's actually from Jay Leno. And Jay Leno, of course, famously has one of the greatest car collections ever assembled.
Yes.
And in a lot of his shows, a lot of his episodes on his show, Jay Leno's Garage, he has a great saying. He says that cars have changed as much from 1990 to now as they did from 1900 to 1990. which is to say that like the pace of technological development has just gone so much faster.
Yep.
And so as far as safety features evolving, to me, the biggest ones are how it makes the car seem less like a chore and more like, and honestly, kind of more like an appliance, like a phone or something like that.
Yes, exactly. I feel, to your point, as coming from a driver's perspective, is when you purchase a vehicle today, you're purchasing a computer. It is a legit computer, and you feel like that. I mean, you're immediately, not necessarily bombarded with features and it's overwhelming, but it can be. It can be. The dashboard can be completely overwhelming, and all you know how to do is just turn that vehicle on. And I kind of touched on that in the first episode of, thinking about that from an investment standpoint. What investment broker is going to tell you to pay 100% and only utilize 10%. And so to the point of evolution of car and safeties, even thinking about seatbelts and airbags, the knowledge that we need to be aware of, that we no longer just have one airbag, right? We have a whole slew of airbags. Well, where are these airbags in the vehicle? And, at what touch points are we safety? What touch points has there been enhancements to the driver and the passenger? Now the passengers are more protected. Now the back passengers are more protected. We have side airbags. And so with that evolution and thinking about that from, I would say, talking a little bit about airbags from your perspective of being at the car dealership and connecting people to the vehicles. And knowing how important that is, the evolution of that. What would you say, shedding some light on how airbags have evolved?
Yeah, airbags. Actually, that was the first thing I was going to talk about. Airbags are a big one. For a long time, it was cars only had one airbag just in front of the driver, and that was it. And then passenger airbag was added, or the front passenger airbag was added a bit later. But nowadays, like the role of the driver that we talked about, it's changed not only the role of the driver and passenger, but also the car shopper. All the time at Citrus Kia, I'm always getting questions of how many airbags does the car have? And this question is most often asked by people buying the bigger, not even bigger, but just like buying SUVs, right? Some of the bigger vehicles in general, particularly the Kia Telluride, the hottest car, that everyone seems to be looking for. All the time I get questions on the airbags and that thing, because it's a big 3-row SUV that is designed for carrying people, carrying families.
Yeah.
And so it goes without saying that airbags in front of the driver and passenger, but then it's also actually become pretty standard that on bigger vehicles like this, there are side curtain airbags. So, the structural parts of the car that are on the left and right, which are called the pillars of the car. The pillars are actually identified by letters going from the front of the car to the back of the car. So like the first pillar that, as the driver, you see going in front of you to the hood, that's called the A pillar. And then you go back on the A pillar, B pillar, C pillar, and so on.
Okay.
So when you get into bigger SUVs with 3 rows, you could be looking at a D pillar, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, if it's a big enough vehicle. And it's become pretty common now for these pillars to have curtain airbags.
Wow.
They're called curtain airbags because they actually go over the windows and they cover the sides. And so what those do, and that's actually, I touched on this in the first episode, my last vehicle was a 2015 Kia Soul. And which I wish I still had, but it got in a bad accident a few years ago. And I was actually T-boned on the passenger side. The steering wheel and passenger airbags didn't go off, but the side ones went off because the vehicle detected a side impact.
Yeah.
Yep. So the airbag went, and that was the first time I'd ever been in a vehicle with airbags that went off, actually.
Wow.
And I mean, they go off so fast. It's like your brain cannot discern the hit with the airbag.
Correct. It's an unexpected impact.
Yeah,
and that's the safety of needing them there.
Yeah, it happens so quick. And the side airbags, they go in between your head and the window. And so that serves 2 purposes. It keeps your head, if something hits you this way and you go like that, it keeps your head from hitting the glass, and it keeps the glass from coming in on you.
Got it.
And so now, as SUVs have gotten bigger, accommodating 3 rows of seating and everything, they've had to add more side curtain airbags, which are especially important than if you have like kids or toddlers or pets in the back. And more recently, even like I said, those have become pretty standard. But now the kind of, I guess the cutting edge of airbag, even though airbags have kind of become an old technology at this point, the newest airbags can actually be found in the seatbelts themselves, where one actually comes out right here. It doesn't go up in front of your face, but it just cushions the strap so that when something hits you on the chest, it doesn't it lessens the chance of bruising. There are also airbags in the sides of the seat, like right down here. And that airbag actually comes up in between the driver and passenger to keep the two people, to keep the two people's heads from doing that.
That is so interesting because I believe that now that you have explained how those airbags are coming up, you can see why crash testing is so important. That just came to my mind with crash testing because I know that many people that have been in accidents, they suffered bruising from the seatbelt and different injuries from the seatbelt. So to know that they have that airbag there that can provide that cushion along with the airbag in your front, I didn't even know that they had that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, there are also knee airbags, like for the knees. Yeah, and it's actually an airbag that comes, it's under the dash. Actually, kind of, where you can turn on like the air vents for your feet if you want to warm your feet up. It's actually down there. Not every vehicle has these, but some do. The knee airbags, they explode down there, and they actually come out at an arch.
Right.
But, and this is the other actual important thing to know about airbags. Airbags have actually changed shape over time. Some airbags are still like this, like the one that comes out for the driver or the passenger for the face, still mostly look like a pillow.
Okay. So a rectangular shape. Not
a rectangle, a circle, usually.
Okay. Got it.
To accommodate the shape of the steering wheel. But yeah, that's still kind of what those are. But, side curtain airbags, think about it. All vehicles have different shaped windows.
Right.
And different size windows. So those are all like tailor made to that vehicle. And the knee airbags, what they do is having this big pillow is a good example. The knee airbags look like this. They curve.
Oh, okay.
So they come out curved. And what happens is if your knees are down here, and the crash zones, your knees are doing this.
Right.
So instead of just one layer of the airbag, it's kind of like two doing that.
Yeah.
So just like I said, despite being a kind of old technology at this point in terms of new safety features, they're still finding ways to improve airbags. Yeah.
Yeah. Going from only having one.
And all the time I get the question, how many airbags does they have? Can you show me where the side airbags are?
Wow.
That's one of the most often one of the most common questions I get.
You're listening to Features Talk, shedding light on the new era of automation. To find out more, go to www.FeaturesFirstAuto.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa Bailey.
I know I thought as a driver to ask about how many airbags, but never thought to ask about a side airbag. And especially like that when you're thinking about children. I have 2 children that sit in the back. To know that I have side airbags would be great. That provides another level of security when you're driving.
For you or anyone watching, next time you get in your car, if it's a car from anywhere even close to a modern car, look in the pillar. The pillars are like the structural things that separate the doors. Look in the pillar. You might see a little oval or something, and it will be labeled airbag. Okay. That's where the airbag comes out from.
Wow. Okay. There we go with those tips and tricks from Luke. That's why I'm so excited to have you here. Now, when we were talking about this a little bit earlier, you shared some really interesting information when it came to the engines and the transmissions and how they have evolved with the positioning. Share a little bit about how they have evolved and how they are actually responding just like airbags in a collision for our safety. So there are things happening now that were not happening before.
Right. Yeah. So with the engine, well, actually one kind of, I would say, passive. So this is getting into a whole nother topic that we'll get to. Active versus passive safety features. That's a whole separate thing. But to kind of as a preview to that, one kind of passive safety feature of modern engines is not really one that came as a result of trying to make them safer, but just think about the fact that modern engines have gotten smaller and more fuel efficient. The car is simply carrying around less weight and therefore has less momentum to stop in a crash.
Right.
So
very true.
What's more, regardless of any other safety features, a Cadillac Eldorado in the 1960s had, in the 50s had an 8.2 liter V8. The car, your Optima's engine is a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder.
Wow. Wow.
So what is, regardless of any other safety feature, if you got in a front accident,
yep,
what is going to be safer? One of your engine or four of your engines in front of you?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's part of it. But more importantly, there have actually been active steps taken to make the engines, the actual physical part, safer. And by that, I don't mean like, oh, make it less likely to explode or catch on fire. That's just a given. That's just,
exactly.
That's just more cars being reliable than being safe. One of the biggest things that modern engines do, I forget what the first brand to do this was. See, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was in one of the American brands. It might have been Toyota or maybe even Kia or Hyundai. What they started to do, and I forget what year this started, the engine mounts, which are the actual parts that hold the engine there.
Yeah.
Because, the engine doesn't sit on something. It is held in on the side so that it can do its thing. The engine mounts that actually hold the engine in place actually are capable of letting the engine go in a frontal collision. So
wow.
At the moment, and this is what's so weird, because in the time it takes the human brain to think about this sequence of events, someone could die in an accident.
Yes.
So, and that's why the computers and sensors in cars being able to do this so quickly are just still, even to me, as someone who does computer stuff all the time, it's still amazing.
Yes.
But at the point of the impact, the car, in a matter of milliseconds, detects where the crash is coming from, how hard it was, and what safety systems to activate.
Wow.
And in a frontal collision, one of the problems or one of the potential dangers is that engine coming through the passenger compartment. Especially
coming through. So you mean coming through in the vehicle?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Like actually, which seems crazy because.
Woo!
Which seems crazy, but it can happen. There's crash test footage where people have actually restored old cars. I mean, like the IIHS, for example.
Yes.
And NHTSA, who do these. If you guys have ever seen like those slow motion crash tests where it's like where it looks like the car is just where you can see it in slow motion.
Yes, crashing. Yes.
Do that. It's happening at speed. It's just being filmed at tens of thousands of frames a second, so you can see the slow motion. Some companies have actually restored old cars to their original state and then crash tested them as a side-by-side comparison.
Wow.
And what would happen with some crash test dummies is they wouldn't be killed by glass hitting them. They wouldn't be killed by the dashboard. They'd be killed by the actual engine punching through the dashboard and hitting them.
Oh my goodness. That is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but that's the way it used to happen, because in old cars, the engine is just held there, it's just bolted in there, and whatever happens.
Wow. But
what modern cars have done, and I said, I forget which brand this started to do this, the engine mounts will actually let go of the engine. So when the car hits something forward, the engine drops down. It actually falls down to the ground so that it goes underneath the car instead of in.
Wow. Well, that's amazing, because I, for one, appreciate that right there, with the fact that the engine will, God forbid, you have an accident, but the reality that engine will fall and it will not come into the vehicle. Oh my goodness. I didn't even know that was a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, it can happen. And it's actually become a pretty standard thing. Pretty much every car has something like that.
Wow.
And then also, as far as the transmission is, to a lesser extent, not that it isn't important, obviously it's an integral part of the car.
Yeah.
And well, I guess we might as well talk about transmissions while we still have them, because once EVs come around, transmissions will be a thing of the past.
Exactly.
But, the current state of most cars are still utilizing engine transmission. So in the case of transmissions don't necessarily have a thing where they drop down.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because modern transmissions are not as big or heavy as the actual engine itself.
Yeah.
But what some cars do, and actually more sports cars and supercars use this, they actually mount the transmission in the back. So you could have the engine in front, but the transmission actually in the back by the rear axle.
Wow.
And so that does two things. One, it improves weight distribution, because two of the heaviest single components in a car are the engine and transmission. So when you spread out the heavy things over each axle, it improves weight distribution. But then if you think about it, and if you get in a front collision, transmission isn't a factor in that.
Exactly. That's some interesting information when it comes to the evolution of cars. And thank goodness, because what I do realize is when you're deciding to get into a car and take a drive, there's a risk. There's a risk for you and there's a risk for others on the road. So, just to know how technology has provided so much safety benefits to the driving experience. As an early adopter, it makes me happy. And that passion is why we do what we do here at Features First, is to get everyone and the community aware of these technologies and how your driving role is changing over time, the evolution of things, and staying ahead of it and understanding the information so that you can do your part, right? Because this is a collective, this is a collective effort. And that goes into the driver's responsibility, and I think that the biggest... Go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say, it kind of makes you wonder with a pure electric vehicle where there is no engine and no engine mounts and no transmission.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
You're completely removing these components. That's kind of makes you excited to see what safety is going to be like for those vehicles.
It's definitely going to be evolving, and that is a whole different lifestyle. Because I'll tell you, having and charging your vehicle at home, what does that look like for your light bill? There's going to be a whole lot of new things that we become more aware of. Best practices when to charge your car. It's better to start knowing these things now than to just be hit later on with it when you have no idea. That's where frustration sets in and you just feel like you're completely, a fish in water. You're just floating. You have no idea what's going on. And that falls into one of the best practices that I just want to touch on, which is the driver's responsibility. Yeah. And I believe that in many, the automotive industry, technologists, developers, manufacturers, they all believe that the driver's awareness when it comes to technologies in this year and moving forward is the biggest change. You are no longer just showing up, purchasing a vehicle and keeping up with the trends. I want the next latest, greatest thing. It's fun. I love shopping for cars too, but there is a level of awareness, that's being required of us as drivers and passengers. So the passengers are no longer, just going to be sitting there on their phones and not participating with the safety journey as well as the driver. When you're talking about technology and moving forward, where they're talking about implementing human machine interfaces, where a lot of the things that we are doing and how we interact with our vehicles will be on the dashboard, that they'll be on the actual, like the windshield, and you'll be sliding. It's like what you see in the movies is a possibility as to where we can head. And so that involves the passenger and the driver. And I believe that the new safety features and technologies that are being implemented in cars is just further validating that driver's responsibility of awareness. What do you think about that, Luke, as a product specialist, someone who is constantly talking to drivers and relaying their role with the technology and what's in their car to keep them safe? What would you say as a best practice for driver's responsibility as well?
Yeah, when it comes to the best practices for modern cars, the single best practice, regardless, is to not get complacent and think that the safety features are going to do everything for you.
Right.
It's never okay to think that just because a vehicle has forward collision, automatic braking, that you're never going to hit something from the front.
Right.
And it's not okay to assume that, that if you have smart cruise control, you can have it do its thing while you take a nap. Doesn't happen. Right. So the best practices for these kinds of things that's, like I said, like the big blanket statement of it all is don't get complacent. Don't think that the safety features are there to drive the car for you.
Yep.
That being said, one of the best things you can do is, explore any and all resources to become familiar with the safety features. A big one is going to be, tuning into these podcasts and exploring the resources that Features First is going to provide for these kinds of things, especially as more safety features come about, improvements on the ones we currently have and ones that none of us have even thought of yet.
Yes.
So we're going to be getting more into that. We briefly touched on like the safety of EVs. We've got a whole EV episode coming. So, where there's going to be more resources coming. on our end. But then also, just like the automakers themselves, regardless of anyone else like us, automakers themselves they have a vested interest in making sure that their customers are familiar with the safety features of their own vehicles. And so the best practice is to really do what you can to learn about them. And I understand it can be an overwhelming thing. Modern cars have more and more of these kinds of safety features, but take it a day at a time. And if it really is something that is kind of intimidating, but then, if you because I've talked to a lot of people at work who are kind of in this middle ground where, they want to be more familiar with safety features because they're looking at getting this Kia Sorento for their family because they have a kid. They have a kid on the way. But also they're like, oh, I haven't bought a new car in 12 years. And so I don't really know how to tackle all this stuff. If you find yourself in that kind of middle ground, maybe take it a day at a time. Just tell yourself, okay, today I'm just going to learn about this feature. Today I'm just going to learn what does lane keep assist do?
Yep.
Forget all the other computers and stuff. Just what does this one safety feature do? However you want to tackle that. The best practice is to know the safety features. Do whatever you can to become familiar with them, because then the best practice will be to actually use them. And the more familiar you are with them, then the safer you'll be on the road, because the car is going to be, like I said, not driving for you, but the car will be able to step in and take some active steps to keep you safe. So the best practice would be to learn about the features.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Becoming a community member of Features First keeps you updated. We created this community for the purpose of the public, but not only the public, the business partners as well, because the automotive industry, the manufacturers, the engineers, they need to connect with the end user. We are the end user of the vehicles and the technology that they're putting in there. They need to hear our voice. They need to hear how we interact with it, how we engage with it, and what our perspective is on the experience, because that helps them create a better product that will be beneficial to us all. And so you kind of touched on something really cool when we were talking about the EVs and thinking about EVs and the possibilities of things changing safety wise, maybe some luxurious wise ways as well. You had touched a little bit on electrification. And so the speed that can be achieved in electrical vehicles, and thinking about that, maybe there might be some evolution down the line of the speed limit.
Yeah, that could happen. I think about it every now and then. And I mean, maybe other people have thought about it too. It's like, why are there speed limits? Are there speed limits to, just because, I don't know, just to help make people drive more efficiently? Because once you at least in a gas engine vehicle, once you pass about 60 miles an hour or so, give or take, depending on the aerodynamics of your vehicle, you've now passed the ideal speed and drag coefficient to achieve best fuel economy while cruising. Do they just have speed limits so to rake in some extra money from speeding tickets?
Yeah,
partially yes. But really, what's the reason? Why are there speed limits?
Right.
And it comes down to one thing: human reaction time.
Yep.
Human reaction time, it can only get so good. There are I forget the exact number, but it's actually been calculated that the average human reaction time is something, some number
seconds, right? Milliseconds or something like that.
Yeah, it's measured in milliseconds.
Yeah.
And obviously there are certain deviations with some people, but really it's human reaction time. And the faster you go, the quicker things can happen beyond the human reaction time. And so it kind of makes you wonder then. And this kind of goes back to what I talked about. Cars are already faster than us.
Yep.
I don't mean that we can't run at 200 miles an hour, but a supercar can. I mean, I currently drive a 2014 Toyota Tacoma. Which doesn't have any of the safety features that we, or at least more of the advanced ones. Obviously it has airbags and ABS, and any modern car does, but lane keep assist, smart cruise control, forward collision, automatic braking, please. A 2014 Tacoma, no way. But if I were to hit something on the front, if I were to get into a frontal collision, within 10 milliseconds, the car would know exactly when to deploy the front airbag.
Yeah.
And it would drop the engine so I wouldn't get hurt.
Yep.
And it takes a human, on average, about 150 milliseconds to blink your eye.
Wow.
And so then what happens when a car goes all EV and everything is doing that? What happens when they become self-driving?
Yes.
And actually, it's more important to say self-driving than EV. It's just we can assume that a fully self-driving car will be EV by that time. But
exactly.
But yeah, so like what about when cars are fully self-driving and their reaction times are so much faster than a human's would be?
Exactly.
Given
that changes.
Right. And let's assume that we've gotten to the point where we just can know that self-driving works.
Right.
We've gotten to the point now where we can just assume that our engines will work.
Right.
Well, in the future, it will come at some point. We can just expect self-driving to work.
Yes.
It won't even be a thought.
Exactly.
When we get to that point, will we be cruising to work at I don't know, will we get to a freeway and just the car will just be soldiering on at 150 miles an hour because it's seeing so far ahead and actually in communication with other vehicles around it?
I'm being recalled. There's a movie. I can't think of the movie.
It's
but
interesting.
Yeah, what you're explaining is the person would get out when they would get into the car. It was like that car kind of went into this whole very fast realm with the other cars, and they were going fast. They were going really fast, and they would get to their destination like this. So, and that is possible when you're thinking about self-driving vehicles and the technology being more precise and being programmed to respond a lot quicker than a human can. And that's one of the statistics that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration puts out on most of everything. 90% of crashes are because of human error. It's either you were distracted, you were not paying attention, you didn't respond fast enough, but it was some human interaction or aspect of it was contributed to that crash and collision. And so that's the reason why you see the ADAS safety features. Those are to provide an extra cushion for you as a driver. Lane keep assist. I am for one. I said that in the first episode. I love that feature. It helps me because maybe you're tired, maybe you're not even paying attention and you drifted in the other lane. You can help me, you can push me back in the lane so that nobody else get hurt. I'm all down for that. And so I think the more we explain it that way and the more we bring it to the community, the engagement, the adoption and the utilization will increase and it will be better for everybody. And so speaking of, the safety benefits, safety features and best practices for now, I know that we can think about the evolution and how there's been a quote unquote upgrade. There has been an upgrade that has happened to us as drivers and how we were taught maybe at driver's education in high school, for example, 10 and 2. If you're thinking about technology moving forward now, what are some changes that you know of, Luke, as a product specialist from a driver's perspective with the evolution of safety features, maybe that we don't know as drivers today that are no longer a good practice?
Oh yeah. So kind of like how a best practice years ago is no longer a best practice now.
Right.
So well, one of the ones you mentioned is most people, you probably all have heard of that. The expression 10 and 2, where you're supposed to, they recommend you hold the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Picture a clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
Yep.
And so, and the idea is okay, well, you can have control of the steering wheel, and from this position, you can make full left and right turns. Which is all well and good. The thing is, just make sure it's adjusted here. The thing is, 10 and 2 comes from a time before cars actually had power steering, which for younger folks might sound weird. Power steering has always been around in my lifetime.
Right.
I've
Absolutely.
haven't come across any vehicle that never had power steering. But my parents had, it was just par for the course back then. Like, why would you have power steering outside of a luxury vehicle or something? But power steering is just obviously unanimous today. It's like, why would you build a car without one? But there was a time before it was ever even a thing, at least not on any kind of consumer vehicle. And
wow.
So with 10 and 2, when you're up here, and you need to turn your vehicle, if you've ever driven a car without power steering, when you're moving, it's fine. When you're already at speed and you just need to go through a turn, it actually feels more or less, I don't want to say the same, but it's easy enough.
Yeah.
But when you're at a dead stop and you need to turn this thing, it is purely your muscle that is turning these wheels on the ground. And so when you're at 10 and 2, you have the leverage of being able to pull down with one hand and push sideways with the other, which is you get a lot more leverage that way. But now power steering has become so unanimous that how often have you driven and gone through a turn with one hand?
Mm-mm. You mean turning the vehicle with one hand? Oh, I always turn my vehicle with one hand. I don't do the 10 and 2.
Exactly. Now, is turning like this or turning like this the safest thing to do?
It's going like, no, it's not. But that's exactly, it's my one hand and I'm just going with the flow.
But we've all done it in some amount. We've all done it, right?
Yes.
Because power steering makes it so easy. And so here's the problem with 10 and 2. And this is why you should probably not steer with one hand like this.
Yeah.
10 and 2 can lead to a problem. And that is the airbag. And again, think about the time before power steering was around. Well, what else hadn't come around yet? Airbags.
Right.
So this would have been a complete non-issue back then. But now airbags are mandatory. Power steering is just a given. And with these two in place, now, first of all, there's no need for leverage on the steering wheel because it's just easy.
Yeah.
But here's the big safety thing. And this is the big takeaway thing. When you're at 10 and 2, your arms are somewhat overlapping the front of the steering wheel. So if you were to get in a collision and that airbag were to come off from the driver's seat, the airbag could hit you under the arms before actually cushioning your head.
Oh, no.
So, and because airbags can deploy almost 3 times faster than you can blink your eye.
Yeah.
That's the amount of force coming out there that might just hit you square in the arm if your hands are up at 10 and 2. So
if not 10 and 2, then what would you say is the best position?
Right. Well, so it's 9. Think of 9 and 3, like right on the sides of the steering wheel.
Got it.
If you look at any modern steering wheel, you'll see they're all. I mean, obviously with some differences,
things, I think, too.
Right? They're more or less shaped the same way, aren't they?
Yeah.
They connect on the left and right. Most wheels connect on the bottom as well.
Right.
Actually, a lot of Mercedes-Benz steering wheels actually only connect on the left and right.
Okay.
And older Porsche steering wheels did that too, like the 959 famously it was one of the first steering wheels to only connect across the side. But yeah, 9 and 3 right there on the sides, that is the best way to hold the steering wheel, because then from here, when you go through a turn,
right.
Let me bring this up in view. Look what's happening.
Yep.
See, at no point are my arms
right.
Now, obviously, if I'm driving, I wouldn't look like this, but the point is, when you turn like this, at no point are my arms crossing in front of where that airbag would fire.
Exactly.
And so, because now this doesn't give you as much leverage, but you don't need that. We have power steering. So having the hands at 9 and 3 keeps your arms out of the way of the airbag. So that's why 10 and 2 is not really a necessary thing anymore. And one thing I will say that I thought about this before. This is one thing that has always been a best practice. In fact, you can fail a DMV driving test by not doing this, which is the looking over your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to make a lane change, if you don't do this, that's like a point against you on your driving test. So it kind of that's, in my opinion, that's something that could go away. That's I foresee and I think more of like a near future when it will be a best practice to no longer look over your shoulder to change lanes.
Yeah. Well, because you have all that, you have the technology that's letting indicating right there on that side view mirror. If you have the safety feature, in my car, it lights up when there's a vehicle that's within a certain distance from me. So I already know not to get over, but just from human behavior, I still look over my shoulder because although the technology is there to help me, it's just been something that I've gotten used to. So I definitely can agree with you and see how that might not be a best practice moving forward when you can look forward and have all of these alerts coming at you and telling you basically what's going on as you're looking here and left and right, obviously.
Right. And there are already safety features to eliminate the need to look over your shoulder. One of the best known ones is that Kia and Hyundai vehicles have, at least in some of their upper trims, have lane change cameras. And this is it's actually become kind of I don't want to say standard, but more common on vehicles with that 360 surround view camera feature.
Right.
The cameras underneath the side view mirrors, when you put on your turning signal, they actually show in video what's in your blind spot right there, exactly as you would, actually better than you would see looking over your shoulder.
Because when
you look over your shoulder, your vision is obstructed by your car right there.
Yes.
But the camera's looking straight out there, and you can see exactly what's there. So that's already in place. Obviously, there's blind spot monitoring in the mirrors. That's become really standard on almost every car.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I am a enormous advocate of getting those little circular blind spot mirrors. You know, the ones you can stick on your mirror?
Yes.
Those little circular ones?
Yes.
I have used those little circular blind spot mirrors on every car I've ever driven. My first car, which was a 1989 Chevrolet Blazer with no ABS, no traction control, no airbags, and no safety feature outside of an automatically locking seatbelt.
Wow.
The car's older than I am. So, so I use them. I use them on there. The Kia Soul I had, the truck I currently drive. These little blind spot mirrors. I have not looked over my shoulder to make a single lane change ever since I passed my DMV driving test, and I've never hit anything on the side. And
where do you get those from, Luke?
Literally anywhere. I mean, it would be in the car aisle of Walmart or Target, AutoZone. Actually, a place like AutoZone or Pet Boys, where they specialize in car stuff, might be the better option because you can get them in all different sizes.
Wow.
So I use those, and I've only ever had cars so far. I've had cars with no kind of lane change safety feature.
Yeah.
I've always used these little blind spot mirrors. I have never once looked over my shoulder, except for the DMV driving test where I knew I'd fail if I didn't.
Yes, that's good advice. Once again, I hope you guys are catching these tips and tricks from Luke, letting you know how you can drive safer and get things that are affordable that will help you with that, because I didn't know about that either. So I'm going to have to look those up.
And I will say one last kind of very actually important thing about this. One of the reasons that automakers are taking steps to kind of eliminate the need to look over your shoulder is if in that second you look over your shoulder, it should go without saying you're looking away from the road where you're going, which is not good. But if in the moment, if you do this and you hit something right there and then all the forward collision safety features are going to happen with your head moving forward this way instead of you already being this way.
Yep. And if you think about that too, it's distracted driving. I mean, if you really like the practice of looking over your shoulder in that split second, you could hit something. Mm-hmm. It's very possible.
Yeah.
Very possible.
And when if you hit something right when you're moving your head back this way, that movement of the neck could cause neck injuries that wouldn't otherwise happen if you were already looking forward. Exactly.
Which is another reason why evolution, technology, and it being implemented into the vehicle, into the in-vehicle technology, and enhancing that experience is important. We need these evolutions to happen so that we could have a safer driving experience, because the reality is before it was all on us. And so the collisions happened because of our error. And so to have another level of safety that's involved, that's automated somewhat, using intelligence and using, just innovative technologies is a good thing. And so your level of awareness as a driver is changing. It's upgrading. And that's why we're here talking about this now. And so I know we touched a little bit about active and passive safety features and what the difference is between an active and a passive safety feature. And so I'm going to lean more on the car guru to talk about active and passive safety features and the differences in between them so that our community can be aware of that as well.
Yeah. So, active, as far as active versus passive safety features, these are things where just to, I guess, to kind of first lay down what each of them are. A passive safety feature, those have been present on cars for a long time,
right?
For a lot longer. Passive safety features would just be, improvements to, chassis design, to the design of the body. Cars going from body on frame construction to a unibody construction. We can maybe in the future we can get more into technicalities of that, but changes in how like structurally how the car is put together. Tires. Even technology and tires, there's a whole industry.
Yes.
There's an industry centered on like the safety of just the rubber.
Yep. We might have to do an episode on that because Continental is making some major advancements in the safety of tires.
Right. Yeah. And so these are all, passive safety features where they don't go out of their way to do anything. They're just kind of there. They just do their thing, but it's just, they improve over time.
Right.
Now, and so those are passive safety features. And another thing like that would be, maybe an unintentional passive safety feature would just be that modern engines have gotten smaller.
Yeah.
We don't need 7 or 8 liter engines to move cars anymore. So we don't use them.
Yep. Very true.
And those would be, the passive safety features. Now it's active safety features that are where the future's headed and where FeaturesFirst is really going to be focusing on, because active safety features are, as the name suggests, things that take an active step towards influencing the car in some way. Or even just influencing the driver in some way. So the first active safety features ever were probably airbags. Airbags are automatically locking safety belts.
Right.
Because like I said, my first car, that 89 Chevrolet Blazer, had no airbags whatsoever, but its seatbelt would automatically would lock if it,
exactly,
if a crash happened. Or have you ever had your seatbelt lock because you just leaned forward in your seat a little too quickly?
And it annoys me, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah, but
I use it on my 8-year-old, and he sometimes doesn't like it, but I'm like, yeah, I know, but that seatbelt needs to be locked the entire time.
Yeah, but that's an early example of an active safety feature.
Yeah.
And in the 1930s, actually, this is obviously way before anything like that. You might have heard of a really old car called the Tucker. You ever heard of that?
No.
Well, the Tucker was a car developed by a guy whose name was Preston Tucker. And there was actually a whole movie. There was a whole movie about the story of Preston Tucker, and Jeff Bridges actually played Preston Tucker. And it's all about, just kind of like the rise and fall of the Tucker brand. And it was just this kind of like, it made a splash and then it was just really kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
But Tucker, in the 30s or so, I forget exactly what year, but they were the first vehicles to have a padded dashboard.
Wow.
So,
cars have come a long way.
Heck, if there was anything else to keep you from hitting your head on something, but hey, at least your dashboard had a 1/2 inch of padding on it.
Wow. Wow.
That at one time was a passive safety feature.
Wow.
But as far as the active safety features, we've gone from just the safety belt kind of locking itself there to now things like airbags that actively deploy. And the cutting edge of active safety features, which our community focuses a lot more on here, are going to be things where that are kind of bridging the gap between us now and self-driving. Right.
So you're looking at, talking about, I know we talked about smart cruise control and lane keep assist, and those, are considered active features. They're providing a safety benefit to you. And you said it best. These features are leading us. These are like in the first episode, our stepping stones, right, to self-driving vehicles. So these features are leading us to the reality of the experience of a self-driving vehicle. And understanding the difference between those active and passive is important because you can see the evolution of one just happens as it happens. So as we move forward, the passive safety features become better over time, but the active safety features in your vehicle are the ones where the developers and autonomous developers are looking at right now, years and years ahead, and how we can bridge that gap to get us closer to that self-driving vehicles to reduce the amount of collisions that we're seeing on the road. And so I think that knowing the difference between those safety features is super important, and understanding the difference between active and passive within the community will be important as well. And we'll in later episodes, we'll be able to get into more information when it comes to that. And so I always like to, when we get to the end of our questions, I always like to ask Luke, because we did this in our first episode, but I love to ask him, okay, what is your best piece of advice as we are wrapping up and coming to an end? What is your best piece of advice that you can give the FeaturesFirst Auto community today that they can implement in their awareness, or maybe something that they can do in vehicles that would make their drive safer?
Yeah, I think one, probably what comes to mind is kind of what I said earlier is, whether the idea of like more advanced safety features is kind of like a new thing to you,
right?
Or whether you're as gung ho about this stuff as we are, and are just like all in on it, or a tech guru or whoever you might be. One piece of advice I would give is, I still just as a car obsessed, car guy myself, I still do this from time to time. Just take pick a day and just learn about a safety feature.
Yep.
Check out YouTube, check out the FeaturesFirst resources.
That's right.
And just, learn about a safety feature that you haven't looked into before, because probably my guess is there will be some that you haven't heard of before, or some that have made it into cars that you didn't know were there.
Right.
So I would say pick a safety feature that you haven't researched and just research. It only has to be one.
Yeah. I love that advice. I love that advice, because that's exactly the whole point of our community. It is to raise your level of awareness. And now when you become aware, there's a part you play, and a part that you play is educating yourself. And so taking a day to just learn one safety feature, visiting our website and looking at our featured features, visiting our YouTube page, listening to these episodes, taking the time to become more aware and educate yourself, it's just going to better everyone. If you have children that will be driving, if you have a community that you are an advocate about or advocate for, this is a way for you to be able to bring a level of safety to yourself and your community and others around you. And so we're all doing our part, right? We're all doing our part to reduce our carbon print. We're all doing our part to recycle and just treat the earth better. And so the reality is we're moving closer to electric vehicles. If you live in the state of California, after 2030, that's going to become a very big reality for you. And so leveling up right now, upgrading right now, when it comes to understanding the technologies that are at work in your vehicle to give you a safer drive and assist you in driving is super important, and it should be a priority. So thank you guys so much once again for joining us. Luke, thank you so much for joining us on the FeaturesTalk podcast. We are so excited. Please, to all of our listeners, make sure that you submit your questions. If you have a question that you would like Luke to answer, or you would like our team to collaborate on, you can send your questions to info@featuresfirstauto.com. And so we are excited, and we will see you again in the next episode. Bye.
Yeah. See you everyone later. Drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at FeaturesFirst Auto, and online at www.featuresfirstauto.com to join the community and empower yourself to drive and ride safely and informed. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, drive safe.